Computer. All right. Good evening. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Umer Khan. I've been involved in certain events over the last few years in residency interview preparation. And we have an esteemed guest, Dr. Shahram Maroof, who is a critical care attending in Illinois, and he is actively and intrinsically involved in the residency application review process, as well as interviewing candidates for residency. So he will be a valuable asset, and he is a very highly active member of the Iqbalian YPC group, and his input will be invaluable in this session and the sessions moving forward. And just to share, he also is coordinating the mentorship program where candidates can be assigned to mentors who will help out with the interview preparation as well as guide through this process. So Dr. Shahram Maroof, he is the man here. So Dr. Shahram, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Dr. Umer.
All right, excellent. So we will be getting this ball rolling, and let me lay out the process that we're going to approach here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the first question that Dr. Jamshed asked about the letter of interest, because now is the time after we have submitted, you guys have submitted your applications and or are in the process of submitting your applications. And now is the most essential part that we are always confused about getting those interviews. So that's going to be one. Then Dr. Shahram will talk about in brief detail about the whole summary regarding how you should be preparing for your interviews. And then we will go over a couple of questions that you have already put forward that I received even before this session initiated. So, and then we will open the floor up to questions from anybody that they have. You can all, of course, post your questions here in the Zoom comment area, and I will look to get to as many questions as much as possible. And we'll try to limit the session to about an hour because I know people's time is important. The session will be recorded, and we will be posting this on our YouTube channel as well as, of course, our Facebook accounts. So just to get the ball rolling, the first question that Dr. Jamshed asked, and it's a very important question, is that what should you do with a letter of intent? How long should this letter of intent be? And I think that's a very pertinent question. So now we have submitted our application. Now, common scenario happens, and it happened probably to me and everybody else also, that I sent out an email to the program coordinator that, hey, I sent you, I applied for your program, and I'm highly interested. And moments later or later in the day, you get a rejection from that program. So the question is, and the myth is that, did your letter of intent actually cause that rejection? No, your letter of intent probably did not cause that rejection. Your letter of intent probably just had them look at your profile, and thus they saw that you were probably not the candidate for them. But that is just a single scenario. A lot of times, if you are a suitable candidate, they will not be sending you the letter. And you only got the letter right now because you just preempted the process, and they ended up sending you the letter right now instead of later on. But the thing to consider is, since all of us, including ourselves and of course everybody else, we are all IMGs, and we have a little bit of time, and we need to do everything possible to try to see if we can get as many interviews as possible. And of course, we have to see how we can do this the right way. The wrong way can cause us problems. If we look to follow certain steps, then we may be able to get a better shot. Keep this in mind. During this whole process, you will all be contacting anybody you know and try to get interview calls. But majority of your interviews will be coming generically, and they will not be coming from references. Yet references will be able to get you some interviews, but I'm thinking, and Dr. Shahram can probably talk about this a little later also, most of your interviews will be coming generically. So you have to do everything, you still have to put up your efforts in this progress. So Number one, the number one thing you should keep in mind is you have to keep your email short, direct, and to the point. You should make sure it is not a generic email, meaning you should not have a copy paste email and says, "Hi, program coordinator." No, they expect you, or it is, of course, nice of you, not nice of you, but also customary that you put in the name of the program coordinator, because that's easily accessible. That's easily, you can easily find that. Dear this, dear Miss this, dear Mr. this, and then you proceed with your letter. Short, direct, and to the point, because they don't have time. One important aspect is that, of course, they're going to be getting thousands of emails on a weekly basis, and you have to, realize that. One thing you have to note is that the subject line needs to be important, needs to be right. So what I used to do is, and that I believe got me a little bit more, responses. This is what I normally wrote in the subject line: "I know you are busy, but please do consider my application." Again, "I know you are busy, please do consider my application." I think that is more a subject that is a little bit more approachable, and that may help you get a few more responses. I think most people will be putting down residency application, eager for an interview. And that's also fine. And it's up to you what you think about this. But for myself, I felt that it worked a little better if I was more approachable in my subject line for my email. So that is something for you to think about if you feel that is something you could do. Next, what you have to do is, of course, you spell out the name of the person. You give a brief introduction that, "Hey, I am Mr. This, Mr. and or Miss this, and I am highly interested in your program. My scores, I believe, are excellent, and I have this U.S. clinical experience as well as research experience, which I feel will be a valuable asset for your program. My ID number is this." And and you could probably add something personal that you can add, that, "Hey, I think I would like the area that you are in, and I believe I will be a person who is suited for that particular location, as well as the fellowship opportunities down the line that you have in your program. I believe this program will suit me well." And then at the end, I would recommend that you say something pleasant, because these people are bombarded with numerous emails. So I would suggest you end any of this letter after the small brief that we just talked about, that "I look forward to hearing from you soon, and I hope that you have a pleasant day ahead." So again, "I look forward to hearing from you soon, and I hope that you have a pleasant day ahead." I think you may end up being a little different than a normal IMG whose English is not that great, and whose knowledge of how to write pleasant emails, at least in English, is not I would say up to the mark from the American standards, at least. But make it personal, make it short, sweet, and be nice. I think be nice here in the US goes a long way. I think a lot of us, including myself, we've learned sometimes that the hard way. So yeah, that is what I wanted to talk about. And if you have any questions about this, we can look to address this also. One thing before I forget is that make sure that you don't bombard them every single day you're sending out these messages. Maybe wait, maybe once a week, or once every 2 weeks, you send out a message like this. The other thing is that a lot of times you may be willing to call them, and that's perfectly fine. Most of the time you will not get through to somebody, but you will be able to leave answering a message on the answering machine. So always have this prepared as well, and you can follow the same script that "I know you're awfully busy, but I just wanted to show my interest, and I believe that I will be an excellent candidate for this program, and I could provide adequate. I could with my this experience, I could provide a decent amount of value here, and I would love to learn in your environment as well. And again, pay your respects at the very end. So that is I think you should consider if you're not able to get through to with email, if you're looking to call. The other thing is which people may employ, that if you are in Pakistan, you probably don't have a US number. So if they're receiving a message from a foreign number, then they probably will not be picking up the phone. They know, oh, this is just another candidate calling me. So, but if you have a US number, and there are a couple of ways of, I think there's one way that's very easy to get a US number. You can get a Skype ID US number. So you can, anybody can look at that. It's probably, I think, $5 or something like that. Back in the day was around $5 that you could get a Skype US number. And that could potentially help you out in getting through to a call. Anyway, so this is about your next steps in the next coming days. But the next most important aspect and would be about how to prepare, how to think about this interview process and how you should be preparing for these interviews. And I will get Dr. Shahram Maroof. Shahram, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Again, thank you, Mobile, for having me here. First of all, a little disclaimer. What we are discussing here is our opinion on how to proceed for the interview process. And this is based on our experience, and this is based on the experiences that we have discussed with other attendings and things like that. By no means this is the only way forward, and by no means that we are saying that based on this discussion is the perfect way to move forward. Number one. Number two, there are a lot of resources that are available these days. There are, people have posted YouTube videos on the interviews. There's the bullet points and interviews and things like that. I was actually thinking to prepare a bullet point slide, on the summarizing the whole interview process, but I saw online there are pretty similar videos already available. So there's no point doubling the work, and you can easily access those. So the point I'm trying to make is you already have enough resources available. What we'll try to do here is summarize some of the things and hit the bullet points that we think are most important. So number one, as we stated, how to proceed for the interview process, right? First, this is the time that you guys are submitting your application. Now is the time to prepare for the interviews. I would start with first question about English fluency. So we are not native Americans and we're not native Europeans, right? So we do have a little bit of accent, and some of us are brilliant in speaking English and some of us are not. What I would recommend is that whoever is not that sharp in the English, brush up some of the common phrases that are used in US, because I've seen people make, talking to candidates, and they, use something really commonly used in US, and the candidates was in deep waters, like he didn't understand what I was trying to explain to him. For example, I'm saying, this thing is underrated or this thing is overrated. People in Pakistan don't usually use these terminologies, if I remember correctly. So I'm not saying that you should take full-on English classes. What I'm trying to say is brush up on whatever you can on commonly used phrases, number one. And number two, if you're not that fluent in English, I would like you to practice speaking slowly so people can understand you. That's number one. Number two is the interview process itself. First of all, I would say you should familiarize yourself with how the interview process works. For example, what are the commonly used media that are going to be used for interviews? For example, Zoom, WebEx, how to navigate those. For example, how to enter the meetings, how to mute yourself, how to turn on the videos, turn off the videos, things like that. Make sure you familiarize yourself with those, WebEx and Zoom especially. Secondly, prepare the room that you're going to be taking the interviews at. For example, the lighting of the room, a place that you're going to be sitting down for your interviews should be well lit. It should not be too bright that it's like all the lights is on your face, but it should be well lit. It should be bright, because that gives a positive environment. If you have a bookshelf full of medicine books, like Murray and Nidal, things like that, and you want to showcase that, that's perfect. It should be on your background. What I've noticed that attendings usually don't like is the virtual backgrounds. For example, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this or not, but on WebEx and Zoom and all those platforms, you can use uh, virtual backgrounds, but they look very real. I still remember a few interviews where I personally commented on someone's background, and they said, "Oh, this is just a virtual background," and there was like a awkward pause for a few seconds, like I didn't know what to say afterwards, and the candidate didn't know what to say afterwards. So I wouldn't personally recommend using the virtual backgrounds. I would use natural backgrounds. If you have plants, like Dr. Khan has showcased a couple of, um, plants behind his background, that looks beautiful, right? Or if you have a, similar area in your house or room, or as I said, bookshelf, please showcase that. Number two. Number three is your internet connection and your equipment or device that you're going to be using with your during your interviews. For example, there's issue with load shedding in Pakistan. There are other issues that you would might deal with. There might lights might run out and things like that. People in US are not used to this, and they don't realize that this could happen. So I would make special preparations so that this does not happen during your interviews, right? If everyone has different situations. If you end up that there's no such place that you can provide Wi-Fi or like a decent Wi-Fi in your room, you can share the room with someone that was in a similar situation with you. I would highly recommend having a good Wi-Fi or internet service, good room that you're going to sit in, and during the interview process no one should be interfering or interrupting you. Number four, I would want you to familiarize yourself with different time zones in US. For example, there are 4 or 5 different time zones that you commonly get interviews. So be very careful on the time zones that interviews were offered to you, right? For example, if your interview was scheduled at 7:30 a.m. Central Time or Eastern Time, this is going to be 1 hour difference, right? Right now, Dr. Khan is sitting at Eastern Time and I'm sitting at Central Time. If in the email it said 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, right? But for me, it is 9:30. So I would want you to be very careful about this, because I've noticed people late and people even missed interviews because of time differences. People didn't realize, okay, this was the Eastern Standard Time, this is the Central Standard Time. To be very careful about those things, right? Any questions so far, Dr. Khan? So those are some of the bullet points that I would say that we should be mindful before the start of the interviews process.
All right, excellent. Yeah, those are very pertinent points. One thing is what I've seen is that your video may not, your webcam may not be the most high resolution webcam. Doesn't really matter. But if your audio is bad, then that could be a deal breaker, because if you can't hear somebody, then you may have the best video, but if your audio is terrible, then that could be a deal breaker, or that won't work out.
Yeah, and there are some lightning devices, like people in social media, right, end up using like the small light that sits behind your laptop or your computer, and it gives a good brightening. We generally, even last year and even year before that, when we were doing the lectures and interview preparation, we actually recommended those. We should try to buy those light stands and put behind your computer so that your area is well lit.
Right, your face should be well lit. I've seen scenarios where people have the window behind them, and whatever they do in front of them, they can put any light in front of them. The light behind them, the window, is going to be so bright that it's going to minimize, is going to the white balance effect won't really work properly, and your face will always be dark. So yeah, definitely try to have a light in front of your face somehow, that your face is lit, and definitely don't have a window behind you. Right. Yeah, excellent. So we have a couple of questions that people already sent us, and I think one of the most common questions, just to get the ball rolling, and as Dr. Shahram pointed out, that there's so many resources online that you can get the answers to your questions. But the point of this discussion, as well as other discussions we will have in the future, is that you sort of get a viewpoint of some other people, and you can see from yourself what viewpoint you should look to do. But the most important thing you should keep in mind is that you need to be yourself, At the same time, you have to prepare for the interview. You have to prepare your answers multiple times. You have to sit in front of a mirror, or best, you need to have 2-3 people that you can actually coordinate with and go over a list of 10 to 15 questions that you will have prepared ahead of time. And you have to try to act natural. A lot of times we are good in memorization, but memorization is easily picked up by the person who is interviewing you. So you have to try to, act natural, act a little bit of a casualness in your answer, but at the same time, your answer must be prepared.
Yeah.
First,
Sure.
yes, please, Shahram.
So like now talking towards the actual interview process preparation. So as we discussed, like the preparation for interviews, like you should try and prepare the questions itself. For example, someone even asked the question about tell me about yourself. So I personally believe that you should be well prepared for that question. You should have memorized each and every aspect of your answer to this question. But as Dr. Khan pointed out, it should not be like you're just verbatim, you're just throwing things at the person. You can still act that, oh, I'm thinking about it and I'm expressing it in a way that it looks natural, but your question should be prepared, like beforehand. And this is just one example. At least 20 or 15 or 20 questions should be prepared by now. Other thing is, like, there's a whole different section about body language. I can tell you personally, when I was preparing for the interviews, at that time, of course, there was no virtual interviews. We were in-person interviews. I actually had some time, so I actually studied about body language. Hand gestures, your face expressions, and all of those things count. So if you have some time, I would advise, reading up about that, or there are even YouTube videos you can watch from the experts who have suggested what body postures describe about your
इंटरव्यू में 4 घंटे अकड़
can you
के
please,
बैठा रहा बात मेरी कमर अकड़ गई
can you mute this? Sorry. So Dr. Khan, can you mute is there a way to mute the audience, please? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I was also on
Yeah.
mute. So yeah, I think everybody's muted now.
Okay, all right. So for example, I'll give you an example. When if I remember correctly, there was one topic about the hand gesture, right? So if you keep your hands closed like this during the interview, I don't know, in the virtual interviews, you'll not be able to, they might not be able to see the full upper body, but they might be able to see full upper body based on how you are positioning your camera. Anyhow, if you keep your hands closed up like this, that means that you are tense and there's something that you're hiding. So, even the hand gestures like this, it means that you're tense and you're hiding something. Instead of that, if you keep your hands relaxed and open like this, that means that you're open, you're upfront about things. This is just one example. I'm trying to explain to you, there's a whole subject about body language. So your facial expressions, the way that you talk, tells a lot about you. So I would practice in front of mirror those 10-15 questions that we're talking about, that you should be prepared every day before you go to bed. I would try to answer those questions in front of mirror first few days, and practice and practice and practice, and you will yourself see the mistakes that you're making. And after a few days, I would, if you have friends and family around, I would practice these questions in front of your friends. If you're close by with the friends, or you're who are also applying for residency, there will be a perfect scenario for you, that you can ask each other questions and they can answer those questions and they can point out the mistakes that you're making. That's number 2. So I would do that every day before even the start of the interview actual season, so that you can point out your own mistakes and you can actually correct your mistakes.
All right, excellent. So anybody has a question regarding this topic? I do have one question on this topic, and somebody can ask, but I will go ahead with this question by Dr. Maheen Anwar. Any webcam in particular that you recommend? So most laptop cameras are not that great. But if you have like a gaming laptop, then maybe the camera is good. But anything from, let's say, Logitech should be decent enough. Anything coming less than $100 mark from anything from Logitech. I mean, I think I bought a Chinese webcam, I think 2 years ago for $45. That was great. But of course, see before you buy it, just have, when you're at the store, make sure you can see actually what the image is, and maybe you can look up reviews online so that you're sure that this won't have too many technical issues. So make sure you practice your audio, your webcam, your lighting before your first interview. You should have practiced all of this at least, for at least for 10 days. You should have set everything up. Your audio, your lighting, and your image, your webcam should be all tested out. So anything from Logitech should be fine these days. And I mean, just of course, before you buy it, make sure it has good reviews. And of course, you should be seeing it on display actively before you get it. So I don't have a particular in mind, but you can probably find something. All right. So, okay. So we will touch on a couple of these questions. And I think Dr. Shahram already talked about the first one, but we probably will go into more detail about this first question.
Yep.
It is, of course, about can you tell me a little bit about yourself? So if you can take a deep dive in this, Dr. Shahram.
Yeah, so I used to think, and I still think, this is one of the most important questions that can be asked during the interview. And all the interviews that I think I have taken personally, and the interviews that I've been a part of, most of them, either I asked the question or this was asked of me, is, okay, tell me about yourself. So, and you might understand this question or you might not understand this question. I want you to take a deep breath and think about this question. This question is about yourself. This question is not about your academic qualifications. I don't want you to go into details about, okay, I went to the Allama Iqbal Medical College. This was one of the great medical colleges in Pakistan. I was the highest scorer there. I got these degrees. Then I got USMLE 250 and this and that, blah, 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 blah. This is a question where you want to highlight some of the aspects of your personality that you could not highlight in your CV or in your personal statement even. For example, your scores, your academic qualifications are all in your CV. I'm not saying that you should not mention anything about your academic qualifications. Definitely you should. But I would personally, again, as I said, disclaimer, this is my opinion and this is Dr. Khan's opinion. I would personally open up with something related to my family if it's interesting. For example, I'm from one of the most beautiful places in Pakistan, or one of the most beautiful places in the world, which is Kashmir. And this is my family. And then, for example, I would move forward with, okay, this is me. This is, how am I like? I like sports, I like cricket. I'm just giving you examples what you should be highlighting on. And then I would focus towards, okay, then during my academic qualifications, I did this. If you have some stellar research projects, yeah, you can mention, I'm really interested in this part of medicine. I did some research on this and, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, do not just focus on your academic life. Focus on your whole personality, starting from your family. Then what are you like? What do you like in yourself? And, what are some of your strengths? You can even mention, okay, as a personality, my strengths are that I get along with the people, and I think this would help me getting along with my colleagues, and this will help me establish a good rapport in my residency. You can mention that, definitely. So it should be a wholesome answer, not particularly related just to your scores. Another thing that I would want to mention is that please do not say that my hobbies include watching TV or watching movies, or I'm a big or if you're talking about your hobbies, don't say that watching TV is your hobby. Yeah, if you have some specific interest in something, for example, I'm a big Harry Potter fan, or I'm a big fan of this series, you can mention that. But as a generic answer, saying that I like to watch movies, this is not a hobby. So in your hobbies, please mention something related to sports. For example, if you like collecting coins or things like that, those are hobbies. Watching TV is not a hobby, because I'm saying that because I have noticed people say that in the interviews. Oh, what are your hobbies? Yeah, I just watch TV. So please be interesting. Even if you're not interesting, think something interesting about yourself and highlight that instead of just saying some generic answers. um, you know uh, for example, you're coming to US. Many people might not know about the sports that you play. For example, cricket, field hockey, all the sports that we play in Pakistan are not very common in US, right? So if you are going to mention these things in your interview, please be prepared to answer what is cricket, what is field hockey. If you're saying cricket, please be prepared to answer what are the differences between cricket and baseball. What are the differences between field hockey and ice hockey, things like that. Because if they are interested in your personality, if they're interested in your hobbies, they might ask you questions related to that. So your whole interview is probably going to be driven by this one question. So the way that you're going to handle this question, more and more questions are going to be generated based on your answers. So whatever you say in the first few minutes might end up, you know, being the framework for the whole interview for the whole next 30 minutes.
All right, excellent, Shahram. I got a question from Dr. Jamshed Akhtar about, I'm going to jump back into this topic. This is about the letter of intent that we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Would you recommend to send the letter of interest to the email address other than given by the residency? So maybe his question is an email address that is outside the residency coordinator's email, like if I have the email of the PD. Okay, so he's saying that if you have an email from somebody else other than just the coordinator, I think the coordinator is good. If somehow you have the email for the PD, then that is also okay. Just keep it short, keep it nice, as we talked about earlier. Um, yeah, ideally, you don't want to bombard the PD too much. The PD could have clinical duties. The PD could have so many other administrative duties, but you necessarily don't want to. If you have a personal connection with the PD somehow, the PD, the PD from somebody, maybe that's always tricky about how you will use a reference. Somebody may say, okay, he's using a reference. They don't think that the person does not think that I'm good enough, and I need a reference to connect to this PD. So I would be careful about the PD personally. Dr. Shahram, you may have a different take on this. I would stick to the program coordinator, unless you know that PD is usually very approachable, but that's difficult to tell. But I would stick with the coordinator.
I agree with this actually. And most attendings and most mentors that I've spoken to, they actually do mention that we should not be approaching program director. To be honest, it is more likely to backfire than be of your advantage, because program director is very busy, and usually the emails that he's getting are much more important than an email that he's going to get from one of the candidates out of hundreds of candidates that have applied to his program, right? This is a designated job of program coordinator. So I would actually just reach out to program director. I would email program director, a program coordinator instead of program director. And Dr. Khan did a very good summary on how to write the email. I just want to add a couple of things. I personally wouldn't email someone on a Friday morning, on a Monday morning, or a Friday afternoon. I would try to email Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Most things in US actually happen in the middle of the week. Monday is usually designated to complete the work that was kind of left out on the last Friday, or something that's already planned. And even program director would have a lot of emails to skim through on Monday, and a lot of agendas and a lot of topics that he has to create for the whole week. So I would refrain from contacting the program coordinator on a Monday morning, and I would refrain from contacting them in a Friday afternoon, because that's the time they're not even thinking about job anymore. They're thinking about their upcoming weekend. So middle of the week, I would try to contact them, and the email, the email that Dr. Khan mentioned is perfect, but I would just put a little bit of personal touch into it. Please, all of you should not write the same email, because then it will lose the plot. So a little bit of personal touch, like why you want to be a part of this program. And I would just bullet point. If you have good scores, I would just bullet point step one, this, step two, three, step two, step three. That's fine. Research bullet point, USC bullet point. That's it. And then couple of lines about, as you had mentioned, like, thank you so much for your time, and I'm sorry to have bothered you at this time, something like that. And then regarding calls, um, as Dr. Khan mentioned, you can have a Skype call and you can make calls from that. Even for calls, I would refrain from calling too much. But if you have to call, again, I would refrain from calling Monday morning or Friday evening. The best time, in my opinion, that I've seen worked is if you call middle of the week, middle of the day, not like early morning at 8:30 a.m. when they have to prepare for morning routines and things like that. Middle of the day, like around just before lunch, 11, 10, 11. This is the time that they're kind of free. They've done their morning work, and they're about to catch up on the stuff. This is probably the time to reach out to them, in my personal opinion. Not early morning, not at the end of the day, not the first day of the week, not the last of the week. Middle of the week, middle of the day.
Excellent. Yes, definitely. We're getting more questions about this interest, letter of interest or calls of interest. Mahin Anwar, um, would you recommend calling the program on the contact number provided? Yes, that is the number you should use. You should not use any other number, Mahin. Okay, to jump back to our question that um, uh, tell me about yourself. Yeah, definitely use that as an opportunity to talk about yourself in general. And second thing I would recommend is you always have a transition sentence before you actually get into answering the question. So if they ask you the question that, hey, tell me about yourself, you could start with, I know this is a common question, and I would like to share the opportunity to tell you a bit about myself more than what is on the CV that is right in front of you. And I do believe that my CV speaks for itself regarding my academic abilities and excellence, which I do believe I'm fairly suitable for this program for. But I personally believe that I am much more than that. And for example, since childhood, I believe people always talk about that. Okay, I'm from a impoverished area or from a poor area. No, I believe I had a good, healthy, positive upbringing. And although, like anybody else, I had my struggles, I had my successes, and I'm now right here in front of you. And just to share a couple of highlights that I would like to state about myself, I was part of the Dramatic Society in my college. I was part of the Patient Welfare Society where we collected blood donations. I am an avid reader of storybooks. So they may not be English storybooks, but I used to read these novels, and I still relish my days when I would have the time or the luxury to read these novels, and they take me to another dimension in a way. Then on a more serious note, I think I am a solid, active, dedicated individual, and I would love to showcase my talents here at your program. And if you have any further questions, I am right here to talk to you. So something, I mean, I'm just coming up with, just at the top of my head. So just be casual, be yourself. And as Dr. Shahram said, bring out something other than the academics. But if there is something absolutely stellar in your academics, just point that part out. Let's say, for example, and I just want to throw something really out there that I was and I still am really excited about is I was part of this research group that we published this groundbreaking novel research idea, or a something novel that I would really want to bring out in this to as a response to this question. So anything spectacular, you should throw it in this portion of the interview also.
Yeah.
I think that's it for this question, right? What do you think? Or Shahram, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I do want to emphasize the point that you made, that it should be more focused towards positivity than negativity. We usually talk about that during the time that we discussed about how to prepare for personal statements, and the people that I've tried to mentor for the personal statements too, that what we try to focus on is that even if you had some hardships in your life, don't focus too much on the negative side of that. For example, I am from an underserved area, we didn't have this, we didn't have that, we didn't have that. Don't focus on that. Even if you have to mention that, mention it in a positive and constructive way. Like, although I didn't have this much resources, but I did this based on what I had. So this should be the goal. The goal should not be to get sympathy from them. The goal should be to get admiration out of them. Okay, so I had this hardship, even if you have to mention the hardship in a constructive way, that, oh, I'm so glad that I was able to do this much in my life, and I'm so glad that I was able to, overcome this hardship and progress towards this goal in my life, and I'm still on my way towards achieving my goals. For example, I'm the only physician in my, I'm the only doctor in my community. That's not the brightest of the statement. Okay, my community was lacking resources in healthcare. I'm so glad that I was able to provide a stepping stone towards the opportunities that could be provided to the community. And I'm going to learn more and more and try to provide more and more back to my community. This should be the focus. Not, okay, I'm already done, I'm the first doctor in the community. I hope you get my point.
Right. Excellent. So this is, I think, out of the law of attraction.
Yeah.
You have to be positive. You have
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
people don't ask for sympathy. Be
Yeah.
yourself, be positive. Don't ever ask for sympathy, because that will be a very negative aspect for you. All right, so I think we're good with this question.
Yeah.
Um,
Should we hit a couple of important questions before we take more questions from the audience, Dr. Khan?
Sure. Okay.
Sure.
I
So,
have yeah. Let me. I have a couple of questions in the chat.
Sure. There are a couple of topics that I wanted to talk about. Number one, the bulk of today's talk is about one particular type of interview. This is the casual interview type. In US, there is a push, more and more of a push towards behavioral interview questions. I recently found out that there were actually studies done that showed if your interviews are behavior based, you are more likely to get brilliant candidates. And some of the hospitals in US are moving towards more and more of a behavioral sort of interview. And I'll explain to you what those behavioral sort of interviews are. But there are some big universities and some big hospitals who are moving towards those behavioral interviews, including Henry Ford, including University of Wisconsin, and many other hospitals. They are doing those behavioral interviews even in internal medicine, as well as the fellowship residency programs. And even when I was applying for my fellowship, I actually had to give a couple of those behavioral based interviews. So what those are, basically, they'll not be talking to you about generic questions about, tell me about yourself, how did you do medicine and things like that. They will be very specific behavioral questions. For example, this was one of the questions that was asked to me. I'll give you an example. So the interview asked me a question like, okay, so you are walking in a hallway, you see someone that who doesn't like you, what would that person comment about you? So basically, what was trying to ask is like, talk to me about your shortcomings, or some of the aspects of your personality which are not that great, or which are not that likable, basically. So very blunt, straightforward questions they would ask you. And other questions, for example, how would you handle difficult situations? So the interviews, those hospitals will take bulk of their interviews just based on their behavioral model. They will not ask about your personality in general. They will just talk to you about those behavioral questions. So what I would recommend is, like, I would try to familiarize yourself with what those questions are and what is the best way to answer those questions. For example, the worst is that you never heard of these questions and you were asked about this. For example, for me, I never knew they were going to ask me behavioral type questions, and all of the questions were behavior. And I was taken aback. Literally, a couple of questions that they asked me, like this question, I took a moment to realize, okay, what is he trying to say? And my first reaction was, sorry, what do you mean? He said, okay, listen to my question again. My question is, if you're walking in a hallway and you see someone who doesn't like you, what would that person say about you? And I was so confused, like, why is he asking me this question in an interview? And then later I realized this is just part of the behavioral questions. So my point is to make you aware of this change in the current model of interviews. And this year, I personally believe more and more of the hospitals are going to adopt this behavioral model of interviews. Only time will tell, but for the last few years, I've noticed more and more hospitals are, adopting this behavioral model of interviews.
Thanks for bringing that up, Shahram. I think one thing possibly what I'm thinking about that is just keep it positive. Again, keep it positive. Be non. Try to have an answer that is non-confrontational, that is not, aggravating the situation. Be yourself. Act like, I mean, be your normal good self, and try to take answers from that, that point of view. Just be positive, be accepting, be logical. Always look out for the patient's interest. That's one. If they throw you a curveball in any manner, always, put the patient's interest first, before anything else. Yeah, just be positive. I think you can never actually prepare for questions like that, but this will bring out your character a little bit more, and that's fine. Just be yourself, be your normal good self. Okay, so couple of questions that we can talk about. One aspect that I always get from candidates is that they don't feel confident. I think you will only feel confident. I think Shahram can also talk about this, that we already talked about, that you have to prepare, multiple times a day, multiple times every single day, and get that confidence. A lot of times we are not talking to people, especially the people who are in Pakistan right now. They will not be able to converse in English as much, but you have to find a way to get this going. And over the years, when we train candidates, we see that candidates from Pakistan, and of course us as well, in the past, we were not confident, and people are still not confident. Work on your confidence. Work on your confidence. Work on your smile. Work on your expressions. Work on your body language and hand movement, and that can still, of course, be seen here through these videos. All right. So, question. Let me see if I can find a question. But then, if not, then I will have my own questions. All right. So, comment question by Dr. Ali. I have a question. If a husband and a wife both are applying in match and one of them gets an interview, should that person request a program for interview for their partner? And if yes, then what's the best way to do so?
So I would see how the interview goes. I've based on my experience and based on the people that I've spoken to, you get a sense of how the interview is going. At the middle of the interview, or when you're trying to talk to other attendings, you have an understanding if your interview is going well or not. If your interview is going exceptional, or you are having such a good chat about your personality with the program director, and that program director happens to ask you about your family, which they generally don't ask, because they usually are not supposed to ask about your spouses and things like that. But if you happen to talk about your family, somehow I would bring it up that, oh, my spouse is also applying, and we would love to be in the same program. That's perfectly fine. But going out of the way and asking about interview for your spouse, I personally would not advise that. If your spouse ends up getting interview in the same program, of course you can rank the program in a way that you can kind of get together on the rank list. But asking the programs directly based just for your spouse, I would be very careful about that. This could go either way. It could go well for you, and your spouse would get an interview, but it could be a deal breaker for you as well. If that is your only interview, then I would not advise talking about your spouse. If you have like 10-15 interviews, yes, and some of the interviews are going really well, and you want to mention that, oh, my spouse is also applying for match this year, then definitely go ahead and you can take some risks. But if you have only few interviews, like 1, 2, 3 interviews, I would recommend against requesting interview for your spouse.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, that's a good answer and definitely pertinent. So another question by Dr. Arham. Any cons for mentioning you have kids during the interview for a male doc? if you are
No,
male and you have kids, I think that's not a problem at all.
no, not a
Yeah,
problem. Yeah,
not a problem
they
at all.
actually, so most programs actually like well-rounded personalities. They don't have anything against people who are married or people who have kids. This, yeah, I understand where this question is coming from. If they don't have enough time, and if they will be bound with your families and things like that. Actually, it's on the contrary. People in US actually like family-oriented candidates. They want you to have a life outside of hospital as well. Although it's a residency, you're supposed to reside in the hospitals, but that's not the case. They want you to have family life. So, if you have kids, that's a plus point actually.
All right, excellent. So, one question I would want to end this session with, and this is a question that I always have to, whenever I'm talking to candidates or mentoring for interviews, they have never prepared questions to ask the faculty or the person who is interviewing them. They have never prepared that, because in Pakistan, you think it's dangerous to ask somebody a question. So I think you should have, depending on who's going to be interviewing you, you should have 5 to 10 questions memorized. And these should be the most important part of your interview at the end. You should have 5 to 10 questions memorized. One set of questions for the program director, one set of questions for, let's say, anybody else, the associate program director. I think the program director and the associate program director should be considered in one category. Then you should have one set of questions for other faculty members who are interviewing. And then you should have a set of questions for, let's say, if you got interviewed by a resident. So of course they will try to have this mixture in these interviews. So I'll give my take about a couple of questions that you can potentially ask that you should make it a little bit value about. Let's talk about the program director. So program director is the head of this whole situation. And I would like to ask questions that let them speak a bit about themselves and let them be expressive, let them connect with you on a level that is different from anybody else. So I would look to ask open-ended questions. Say that, thank you, well, thanks for, again, I would always transition my questions, answer my questions in the transition. Thank you, and great to have the opportunity to ask a few questions. And I did have a few in mind, and I want to get a taste of this program. And from that, I think you are the best person to ask this question. Which way do you think this program is heading? If you could, I definitely want to, I'm really interested in this program, and if you can share a little bit about this, that will be great. That's one. Second, and I'm remembering what I did about 10 years ago. So second question would be, I know you are involved in so many activities, but what would you think would be your greatest achievement or something that you are actively working on as your greatest achievement in this program? That's the second question. Then you could probably come up with 3-4 more questions, but you should have these questions lined up at the back of your hand. You can't be okay, I don't have a question for you. Yeah. That is a no-no. If you don't have a question for anybody, that is a big no-no. But then of course, Shahram.
Yeah, so there's actually a way to answer that question. There's a way to express that as well. If you don't have first of all, if you don't have any questions from the program director, I would say I had a few questions in mind, but your presentation was so good that all of my questions were actually answered. I don't have anything to ask. I actually said this myself, and my program director was so happy. She was like, yeah, I put a lot of effort into my presentation. I'm glad you liked it. So even that is good enough, but you can't say, oh, I don't have any answers. It should be, again, it should be a likable answer. And as you mentioned some of the questions, I personally used to ask, like, sometimes I used to ask, so what are there any major changes in the program that I should be expecting the next 2-3 years? For example, your perspective is that you're going to be in the program for 3 years. Your program director just gave you a half an hour slides initially about what program is like, but there could be changes in next few months or next few years, right? So if you're asking about this, what are the expected changes, or are there any things that or you can just start, oh, I really like your presentation, and I think I have a good idea about how the program is, but I was thinking, are you planning on making any major changes to the program? I would do that. And more importantly, more importantly, I think there are some things that you should never ask in the interviews. Those are more important than what you should ask, in my opinion. First of all, you should never ask a question that was already been answered. For example, if you are, there are so many other questions that actually I want to talk about. We don't have enough time, like how to interact with the residents, how to interact with the, with the other members on the Zoom interview panel and things like that. But one of the most important things is, like, for example, if you are having a lunch or something, a Zoom lunch with the faculty or with the residents, right? And some of your colleagues already asked this question and someone answered this question, please do not repeat that question. That means that you are not paying attention to when someone else was asking. And I've seen this happen multiple times. I'll tell you, in my fellowship, we were sitting there, two people made the same mistake. We just answered the question about schedule. The next person still asked about the schedule. The next person, after a few minutes time, again asked about the schedule. And we, at the end, we just had to say, okay, can all of you please just listen to us once, and we're going to give you the explanation of the schedule. So that's one thing that you should not do, is repeat the question that was already answered. Number two, do not focus too much on the schedule. Don't keep ask don't keep asking questions about what is the schedule like, what is the call schedule like, how many days you expect them to be in the hospital, do you have 2 days of off, or 3 days a week off, things like that, or 1 day a week off. That gives a negative impact. Oh, you're so focused on your time off, you're not focused on your training or your residency. Your focus is more for your schedule. So do not focus too much on that. And thirdly, don't focus too much. I've seen this happen in the past, that's why I'm keep on mentioning this. Don't focus too much on the compensation aspect of the residency. I don't think you should be asking, like, what is the resident salary like and things like that in the interview. If someone mentioned, happens to ask it, just pay attention to what they're saying, but do not ask this question. And secondly, regarding housing, what are the rents around you and things like that. I wouldn't personally advise asking the residents and things like that about where, what kind of rents they're paying when they're staying, because I've seen these questions to be asked. You can ask, yeah, where do you stay, do you stay close to the hospital, or which are the good areas to stay on the hospital. Those are perfectly fine questions. But asking questions about what your rent is like, or how many days you get off in a week and things like that, are red flags, in my opinion.
Excellent. Yeah. I think a couple of other mistakes that people make is that they have already explained what are the fellowship programs, or it is already on the website. So again, yeah, one thing before we end here today, make sure you know everything about their program that is on the website. And you should not be asking those questions that are already answered in the website. That's one. And then again, questions like, as Dr. Shahram is mentioning, they already said something about the the schedule, or your work hours, or what specialties they have over there. So yeah, don't repeat those questions.
And one last parting advice that I would say, like, as I think we have mentioned this before, that you should definitely research the program as much as you can. And if you have someone in the program that you can respectfully reach out to that person. But I would ask a question. First of all, I would try to know everything about the program myself. Then I would research about that person, like, what is the person in the program? Is a resident, is attending, what is his role in the program? And then I would ask a question like, okay, most of the programs are similar in US, right? The question should be something like, is there anything unique about the program that I should know about? Or is there something that the program pays particular attention that it should be prepared? For example, I can give you example. I'm from Cook County. In Cook County, we took pride in serving the underserved population. You might not know this, right? Unless you know someone from there. So if you would ask me something specific to Cook County, I was like, please, we take a lot of pride in serving the underserved community. So please make sure that you prepare about that. How do you interact with the underserved community? And what are the things that you can do to help the underserved community? Things like that. So if you're asking someone a question about the program, mention it in a way like, is there something unique about the program, or is there something specific that I should know of, in addition to the general, residency programs?
All right, excellent. I think we are coming on the hour. I did get just one last question, and we'll call it a day after this question. And I will have, I will ask you guys for a recommendation for the next session, possibly. So this last question is from Dr. Mariam Tariq. If some program asks very straight questions like how many programs you applied, how do we address?
I don't think any program is going to ask you about how many programs that you applied for. Very rarely they ask you questions, okay, how many interviews you get, but this is very rare that they would ask you, but they are not that, nitpicky or, sticky that, oh, they would want to know, oh, this program, or you're not like a candidate who they really are dying for, that they're going to say, oh, have you had any other interviews? We really love you. Don't go anywhere else. That doesn't happen. If they like you, they rank you high and they expect you match there. They would not ask you how many interviews you get. Rarely, very rarely. If they do ask you, be very honest. If you got 20 interviews, mention I got 20 interviews, because this will boost you as a candidate. If you got 20 interviews and you mention this to the program director, he would be happy to rank you higher, because, oh, so he's a good candidate. Not just me, there are 20 other programs that like him. So there's nothing negative about mentioning. I know, if I remember correctly, back in the day, they used to say, oh, don't mention that I have so many interviews, because they would think you don't know rank them. No, it doesn't work like that. If you have good amount of interviews, yeah, mention I have good amount of interviews and I'm very happy about it. Because if there are 20 other programs that like you, it's a positive. It's not a negative.
Excellent. Yeah, be positive and say it nicely that don't be arrogant. Yes,
Yeah.
I have 20 programs, and yeah, just say that.
Yeah, like there's no harm in, like, I know some, and be very careful about who you're taking advice from, to be honest. There's I don't want to mention this again. This is one negative about this community, that we try to give, sometimes we try to even give the wrong advice. I don't, maybe intentionally or unintentionally. I used to remember that people used to say, oh, please, if they ask you in the interviews, don't say I have so many interviews, tell them I have only few other interviews, which is completely a wrong answer. If you have 10, 15, 20, be very pleasant about it. Yeah, I'm glad that I have this many interviews, but I really love your programs, and I would be happy to be a part of this program. Be very blunt about it and be very honest about it and be very positive about this.
All right, so we have crossed the hour, and we would like to end the session here. But Dr. Shahram, let's be a little democratic, and I would like to put it forward to this audience. I'm thinking one format is like we did today, that we are answering questions. That is one format. The other format, if anybody wants to give any feedback on that, is that we do mock interviews of people who want to make themselves available or be ready and prepared to answer questions in a mock interview style. I'm thinking that may be a little different, and that may bring out some value, and as well as prepare you a little forward. And there'll be questions that will be new and that we have not covered so far. Can anybody, Dr. Shahram, do you think that is suitable? And if people want to send us a message, if that is a suitable plan, and if you would be interested in being part of those mock interviews.
Yes, Dr. Han, I do think we do the mock interviews from other platforms every year, and I personally think they help a lot. And I've been involved for the mock interview process from the other platforms, so I think they help a lot. But a group platform like this, in which we can discuss the questions that we just did, there are so many other questions that we can discuss as well. So I'm open to both. I think we should probably have at least one or two more sessions about the interview process in general. And in addition, we will get other people who are interested in mentorship, and we should, in my opinion, hold the mock interviews as well, in my opinion.
All right, excellent. So thank you so much for joining, and thank you, Dr. Shahram, for giving your valuable opinion and with this experience that you have. We will look to schedule further topics, and please, you can send us messages on the YPC YPC group, the Iqbalian YPC group, so that we see what you are thinking. And in the future, we'll look to schedule more on the evening time for Pakistan, as well as possibly weekend time for the US. So hopefully we're able to get more people who could not be suited by this time, morning time in Pakistan. Anyways, thank you so much. Thank you for joining, and thank you for your questions. We look forward to hearing from you guys soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.